She barged into my room, tears in her eyes, and hurled accusations I couldn't even process. "You stole him," she shouted, slamming the door behind her. "He dumped me because of you." My body froze. I blinked once, twice, trying to make sense of the words coming out of Sophia's mouth. Her chest was heaving, lips curled with disgust, as if she was spitting venom she'd held in for too long. I hadn't even seen Ryan in days. He was Sophia's boyfriend, not mine. Aside from polite hellos, or the occasional accidental meeting in the kitchen, we'd never spoken more than necessary. "I don't even talk to him," I managed to say. But my voice was barely audible. She pointed at me with trembling fingers. "You don't have to talk, you exist. That's all it takes. You ruin everything just by existing." Before I could respond, she was gone. The door slammed again, rattling the frame. Echoing down the hallway, the house settled into silence. I stood there alone, pulse ringing in my ears, the air around me thick with something I couldn't name: shame, confusion. Later that evening, I walked into the kitchen to grab some water. The lights were off, except for the low amber glow coming from above the stove. That's when I saw it. Ryan's wallet sat there like a trap, partially hidden beneath a magazine. I stared at it for a moment. I could have walked away. I could have left it untouched. But something about the stillness in the room, the ringing words Sophia had screamed, pushed me forward. My fingers closed around the leather. I lifted it gently, opened it slowly. Cards, cash, receipts. Nothing unusual until I got to the ID flap. Behind his driver's license was a folded Polaroid. I hesitated, then pulled it out. My breath caught. It was me, sitting at a sidewalk cafe. Sunlight tangled in my hair, laughing at something just out of frame. It was an unguarded moment. Not staged, not posed, just real. I had no idea when it was taken, but Ryan had taken it. And not only that, he'd kept it close to him, folded neatly, carried daily, hidden. My fingers trembled slightly as I slid the photo back into place. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a secret, and it changed everything, all my life. I had existed in someone else's shadow. Sophia had always been the spotlight, and I had always been the wall behind it. She was loud, shining, magnetic, everything a camera loved and a crowd admired. People leaned in when she spoke. Their eyes followed her when she entered a room. When she laughed, it sounded like permission for others to laugh too, and me. I was quiet, not shy, just quiet. I didn't need attention. I didn't seek it. I told myself I liked it that way. I was the one who turned off the lights in the kitchen after everyone had left. The one who washed mugs, still warm from someone else's tea. I returned books to their shelves, without being asked. I made silence my armor and my comfort. Sophia and I were only a year apart, but we might as well have grown up in different houses. She lived online and in front of mirrors. Her shelves held trophies and skincare bottles in equal measure. Mine held sketchbooks, receipts from used bookstores, and dried-out pens. She was the main character in everyone's story. I was a paragraph. Our parents never said they preferred her, but their voices changed when they spoke to her, softer, sweeter, careful when I spoke. They nodded, distracted. Praised me for being low maintenance. It wasn't resentment I felt. Not really. More like distance. A quiet understanding that some people orbit the sun and some learn to live in the shade. My days were simple. I worked part-time at a small independent bookstore on Main Street. Mornings were for stocking shelves, afternoons for running orders. I liked the routine. I liked the quiet hum of literature all around me. I took evening classes twice a week, creative writing, sometimes psychology. I wasn't chasing a degree. I was chasing peace. Home was a neutral zone I tiptoed through. Sophia still lived there too, though. Our schedules rarely crossed. When we did share space, we barely spoke. She'd be draped across the couch, legs curled under her, phone glowing inches from her face, always posting, always performing. Her boyfriends came and went, like fashion trends. Football players, startup founders, guys with playlists longer than their attention spans. I learned not to remember their names. Then came Ryan. The first time I saw him, I didn't think much. He was tall, dressed in a navy button-down with sleeves rolled up to his elbows. Sharp jaw, clean shoes. He didn't smile much, but when he did, it looked like it cost him something. He was polite, reserved, a little awkward in a room full of people. Which was strange because those were all the things I usually was. Sophia introduced him at dinner one Sunday. "This is Ryan," she said, looping her arm through his. He's in finance or something. I forget." He gave me a small nod. "John, right," I blinked. "Yeah, nice to meet you." He said it like he meant it. Not in that performative way so many others had. Over the next few months, Ryan became a semi-regular presence in the house. He never stayed too long, never overstepped. He always helped clean up without being asked. And whenever Sophia left the room, usually to take a call or fix her makeup, Ryan would fall into a kind of quiet stillness. Not the awkward kind. Peaceful kind. We didn't talk much. Maybe a few casual words here and there. Music. A book I had lying around. Once, he asked if I'd drawn the sketch taped to the fridge. I told him yes. He didn't say it was good. He said, "It feels honest." That stayed with me. I never thought he looked at me twice. I certainly never thought he saw me in that way, until the photo. Until I found it folded neatly behind his ID card, like something treasured. It made everything before it shift out of focus. Every time he asked what I was reading, every glance he held a beat too long, every time he didn't leave when Sophia did, I replayed it all in my mind. And I hated myself for it. Because I had never encouraged him, never flirted, never imagined anything inappropriate. But a part of me, one I had buried so deep I forgot. It breathed, had felt seen by him, and now that part was angry. Not at Ryan, not even at Sophia, but at myself for letting it mean something. The days after the confrontation were silent and tense. Sophia kept her distance, slamming doors and walking with sharp heels on purpose. Our parents said nothing. I didn't explain. I couldn't. No easy way to say, "Your boyfriend carried a picture of me and I had no idea," so I buried the feeling, like I always did. I went to work. I came home. I washed dishes and avoided mirrors. The Polaroid haunted me. Not just because it existed, but because I hadn't known. Because part of me wondered what else I hadn't noticed. What else I'd missed while keeping my head down, and yet I couldn't stop thinking about it. Not just the image, but the way it had been folded. Protected, tucked away like something sacred. Was it ever meant for me to find? Was it a mistake, a secret, a confession? The uncertainty was worse than the accusation. Worse than Sophia's fury. Worse than the silence that now sat between us, like a third sibling no one talked about. Began to feel the shape of something rising in my chest, not guilt, not grief. Something sharper, not loud, not dramatic, just still, like the part of me that had always watched, always endured. Had finally decided to observe back. And I wasn't sure I liked what I was starting to see. The confrontation left the house fractured. Sophia's rage didn't end with the shouting. It calcified into something cold and constant. She stopped talking to me, but made sure everyone else heard her side. She told our parents I was manipulative. Said I had been waiting for my chance to ruin her relationship. That I'd used my quiet, innocent act to get close to Ryan, She claimed I had sent him messages behind her back, that I always inserted myself whenever he was around. None of it was true, but the damage wasn't in the details, it was in the volume. Sophia knew how to weaponize silence, and how to drown truth in noise. Our parents didn't accuse me directly, but they looked at me differently. They started saying things like it would be good for you to find your own place soon, or sometimes space can ease tension. I understood the message. Ryan stopped coming over. There were no texts, no explanations. Just absence, and Sophia took it as proof. "See," she hissed one day in the hallway. "He left because you couldn't keep your hands off what's mine." I didn't reply. Silence became my only defense. Not because I had something to hide, but because nothing I said would have mattered. She needed to believe she was the victim, and I needed to survive. I packed up the rest of my sketchbooks, boxed up my books, and moved into a small studio apartment above the bookstore where I worked. The walls were thin, the pipes groaned at night, and the windows faced an alley, but it was mine, and it was quiet. Days turned to weeks. Sophia's stories mutated in public, online, at family events. Suddenly, I was the one who had always been jealous, the one who had never supported her relationships, the one who made things weird for every boyfriend she'd ever had. Some people believed her, some stayed neutral. No one defended me. Out loud then, one night, while reorganizing a shelf in my new place, I pulled out an old poetry book I hadn't touched in months. A piece of folded paper slipped out and fluttered to the floor. I stared at it, heart pounding. It was a letter not typed, handwritten, tight, deliberate strokes. I recognized the penmanship immediately. It was Ryan's. "John, I never meant to hurt you. I don't even know if you ever noticed. Maybe I imagined the whole thing, but that photo, it was real. That moment, that smile, I carried it because it reminded me that someone in this house was still genuine. I'm leaving." I thought about saying goodbye, but that would make things worse. "This is the only way I know how to leave without causing more damage. You didn't do anything wrong. You were just there, and that was enough for me. I just wanted to tell the truth before I disappeared." There was no signature, no return address, no mention of Sophia. I folded the letter again and held it in my palm. He was gone, abroad, and I was left behind with nothing but assumptions, silence, and the echo of something that almost became love, but never had the chance. I didn't cry. I didn't feel betrayed. I felt tired, because I knew Sophia would never stop blaming me. In the weeks that followed, she cried harder, posted longer captions, curated stories of heartbreak and betrayal for anyone who would listen. She made sure her pain was performative. She needed an audience. She needed a villain. And I was convenient. But I stayed silent. I didn't chase Ryan. I didn't deny Sophia's claims. I just waited. I waited for the noise to collapse on itself. At work, I kept my head down. People at the bookstore didn't know the full story, and I liked it that way. My manager, an older man named Eli, once said, "You've got a calmness about you, John. Like you've already seen the storm and made peace with it." I smiled faintly. He wasn't wrong. Sophia, meanwhile, lost control of the narrative. People grew tired of the drama. Her friends stopped reposting her vague quotes. Family stopped responding to her rants. Eventually, she showed up at the bookstore. I was helping a customer when I saw her reflection in the glass window. Tight dress, red lipstick, storm in her eyes. I turned away. She didn't come inside. The next day I found a delivery at my apartment door. No note, just a brown paper bag, sealed with tape. Inside the Polaroid, the same one I had found in Ryan's wallet, folded, worn but intact. I don't know how she got it. Maybe Ryan mailed it to her. Maybe she found it among his things before he left. Either way, returning it to me was no gesture of peace, it was a message. He wanted you. Here have the proof. Or maybe it was guilt. A feeble attempt to rid herself of the last piece of truth she couldn't destroy. I took the photo, pressed it between the pages of my sketchbook, and didn't speak about it again. Time passed. I started painting again. Muted portraits. Abstract loneliness. Unnamed grief. And every so often, I'd glance at the folded corner of the sketchbook where that Polaroid lived. Not out of longing, but to remind myself that the truth doesn't have to scream. Sometimes, it just sits quietly and waits to be found. I started doubting myself. The letter had brought clarity, but it also left behind the hollow ache of questions I couldn't unask. Had I ever done anything to lead him on? Was I wrong to smile when Ryan complimented my reading list that day in the bookstore? Was I too open when we talked about art, or when I handed him coffee before Sophia returned to the room? Was it kindness that betrayed me or silence? I went through my old journals. I flipped through conversations, texts, even old grocery lists we'd shared in the kitchen. I was looking for patterns, proof, a way to convince myself I had done nothing wrong. But every glance, every moment, every casual word felt different now, tainted. And it wasn't because of guilt, it was because now I saw what he saw, me. Not the younger brother, not the shadow, but someone who had been watched closely, quietly, respectfully, and the worst part was, I hadn't noticed. Meanwhile, Sophia unraveled in the way she always did loud. She sank into curated misery. Her social media turned into a gallery of melancholic quotes, close-up selfies with swollen eyes, and poetic captions like "betrayed by the blood that should protect you." At dinner, she leaned into relatives and whispered loud enough to be overheard. "She ruined my life. She's always been jealous of me. She couldn't stand that I was finally happy." Every word stabbed. Not because they were true, but because I could see how icily people wanted to believe her. She cried at the right moments. She posted the right photos. She made me invisible again, but this time, deliberately. And I let her. I sat in silence while relatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. I didn't explain, didn't justify. When people looked at me with narrowed eyes, I looked back without blinking. I let her speak. Let the silence grow. Let the truth rot in her mouth until it tasted like metal. The more she spoke, the less people responded. Pity turns sour when it's overused. Victimhood, when performed too often, becomes theater. And eventually, even the audience gets bored. But in private, I was still bleeding. I couldn't paint for weeks. Every brushstroke felt dishonest. Every canvas looked like accusation. I'd pick up a pencil, sketch a line, then tear the page out before I could finish. I stopped going out. Stopped replying to Deborah's messages. Stopped reading. Stopped dreaming. The letter lived in my desk drawer. The Polaroid stayed pressed in my sketchbook. I didn't touch either, but I knew exactly where they were. Some nights, I stared at the ceiling and replayed every interaction I'd ever had with Ryan. I wondered if he had ever planned to say something. I wondered if things could have been different if he had stayed. If we had spoken. If Sophia hadn't stood between us like a storm cloud that never moved. But those were dangerous thoughts. So I buried them again. I returned to work. Took longer shifts. Started organizing shelves by spine color instead of genre. The other employees noticed but didn't comment. My manager, Eli, gave me quiet nods, and once left a thermos of tea on the back counter with a note. "Some people only bloom after being cut." I didn't ask what he meant, but I drank the tea. One morning, I walked past the mirror near the front door and actually stopped. Not to fix my hair or check for sleep under my eyes, but because I didn't recognize the person looking back. There was something colder in my face now. Not anger, stillness. That soft part of me that had once wanted to be understood had grown quiet. It was watching now, measuring. I hadn't built walls, I had disappeared into the ones already there. Deborah finally showed up at the bookstore. She didn't say much. Just held out a bag of pastries and shrugged. I figured you weren't going to come out, so I brought the outside in. We sat in the break room. I didn't explain anything. She didn't ask. But when she saw the sketchbook on my desk, she hesitated. Do you still draw people? Not lately. She nodded, then looked out the window. Maybe you should start again. But draw yourself this time. That night, I tried. I picked up a charcoal pencil and stared at the blank page for over an hour. When I finally moved, it wasn't my face that came out. It was the outline of a boy sitting at a kitchen table, holding a photo he never meant to find. A portrait of absence, a study of silence. I didn't sign it, didn't date it, just tucked it under the bed and turned off the light. Sophia still tried to provoke me. Once, she showed up at my building. Uninvited. I saw her from the window standing outside the entrance, arms crossed, phone in hand like she was documenting her own victimhood. I didn't go down, didn't text her, just watched her wait. After 20 minutes, she left. Let her chase ghosts. Let her scream into a void that no longer echoed back. Ryan hadn't come back, and I hadn't left. That was the part Sophia couldn't understand. I wasn't trying to win. I had already stopped playing. But somewhere deep inside, where the quiet parts of me still breathed, I started rebuilding. Not to prove anything, not to be seen, but because if I didn't, I'd vanish completely. A year passed, time, despite everything, had kept moving. Leaves changed, snow fell, flowers bloomed again. Sophia moved out eventually. Not because of peace, but because her drama began to echo in an empty room. She got tired of being ignored. Our parents helped her find a loft downtown. She posted photos from every angle, captioned them with forced joy. New beginnings, one read. Peace, finally, said another. I never liked the way she used words like weapons, and me. I settled into my quiet life. I kept working at the bookstore. I started painting again, this time without judgment. I stopped avoiding the mirror. Sometimes I went entire days without thinking about Ryan, until one morning. A courier rang my doorbell. He handed me a large envelope, flat, heavy, professional. No return address, just my name, printed in block letters. I carried it to my desk and stared at it for several minutes before I opened it. My hands were steady, but my heart wasn't. Inside was a canvas, a painting. It was me, reading in the bookstore. Head tilted slightly, sunlight spilling across my collar. The background blurred out softly, but the details of my face were painfully exact. The way my fingers curled around the spine of the book. The slight tension in my jaw. The piece I wore like a second skin. It was all there. It wasn't flattery. It was observation, and in the corner, where the artist's signature should have been, were 3 small initials, R.T. Ryan. He had become a painter overseas. Or maybe he already had been one, and we just didn't know. Either way, this was his. This was him, and this was either closure, or a door slightly ajar. There was no note, no explanation. Just the portrait. I didn't hang it. Didn't throw it away either. I wrapped it back in its protective layer and slid it into the back of my closet, behind boxes of old sketchbooks and worn jackets. Some truths were too heavy for walls. A few days later, Sophia came by to pick up some documents she claimed our parents left behind. She strutted in like nothing had ever happened. wearing too much perfume and a smile sharp enough to cut tile. Still living in silence, she said, scanning the room with judgment. I like silence, I replied simply, but as I handed her the folder and turned away to return to my desk, she saw the edge of the painting box, where I'd forgotten to tuck it in all the way. What's this? She asked, already pulling it out. Sophia, don't, but it was too late. She tore off the covering and stared. Her face twitched, not in confusion, but recognition. She knew. She knew exactly who had painted it. Her silence lasted all of 5 seconds. Then she dropped it. The canvas hit the floor with a hollow thud, the frame cracking slightly at one corner. She stared at it, then screamed. You think this means he loved you? She shouted, her voice rising with every breath. You think one painting erases everything? She picked up the frame and slammed it down again, this time on the corner of the coffee table. The wood splintered, the canvas tore. You don't deserve it. Her hands shook violently. Her eyes were wide, not with anger, but with something else, something far more dangerous. Desperation. She never loved you like I did, she cried, her voice cracking. I blinked. What? She corrected herself, confused, flustered. He never loved you like I did. But the slip had happened, and it told the truth better than her words ever could. I stood completely still, watching her collapse to the floor, sobbing next to the shattered pieces of the frame. The painting wasn't about me, it was about him, and her. Because for once, someone had loved me genuinely, silently. And she couldn't stand that she hadn't been chosen. She looked up at me from the floor. You don't even know what you had. I didn't, I admitted. But I didn't have to destroy it to know it mattered. She flinched. I walked past her and gathered the ruined pieces of the canvas. It was torn, yes, but not beyond repair. Things don't need to be perfect to be worth saving. Sophia stood, dusting herself off, trying to put her mask back on. Whatever, he's gone. I'm over it. But I saw the truth in her eyes. She wasn't over it. Not him, not me. Not the silence that had outlasted her storm. She left without saying goodbye, and I sat alone on the floor, holding a broken painting of myself that someone, somewhere, once thought was worth immortalizing. Love that had to be claimed through cruelty was never love at all. Sophia left home not long after that. No big announcement. No emotional farewell. Just a sudden silence, followed by an empty room, a few missing shoes, and a post on her feed that read, "Some doors are meant to be burned." She ran off with someone new. A real estate agent, maybe. Someone older. Someone with a penthouse, and a dog, and enough disposable income to fund her curated instability. She rebranded herself. Online new name spelling, vague captions, cryptic quotes like, "Healing isn't linear, and I forgive those who didn't ask." Her followers clapped. Her friends double-tapped. But we all knew what it really was. A disappearance, masked as transformation. She didn't message me, didn't ask about the painting she destroyed, didn't apologize. And I didn't reach out either. Instead, I stayed. The silence she'd always mocked had become my sanctuary. I painted again, not just faces, but light, shadow, memory. I stopped hiding the Polaroid and kept it framed in my studio. Not because of what it meant, but because of what it survived. When the owner of the bookstore decided to retire, he offered it to me. "You've always treated the books better than I did," he said, half joking. I smiled, signed the paperwork, and changed nothing. Same shelves, same bell above the door. Only difference. Now I chose which stories stayed. Deborah visited often. She brought her sketchpad and sat in the back reading section. We didn't speak much, but her presence was warm, like candlelight in winter. She never asked about Sophia or Ryan. She just existed beside me, and that was enough. Life didn't explode into color after the storm. It just settled, and in that stillness, I healed. One spring afternoon, nearly a year after Sophia left, a flyer fluttered against the glass of the bookstore door. International Artist Collective Traveling Exhibit, 1 weekend only. I almost threw it out. But something about the handwriting on the flyer made me stop. I folded it into my coat pocket and forgot about it for 3 days. Then, on a quiet Sunday, I walked across town to the gallery. The space was a converted warehouse, cement floors, tall windows, white walls that hummed with afternoon sun. People moved slowly from one canvas to the next, murmuring softly. The air smelled like fresh paint and wood varnish. I wandered, pausing at brushwork that caught my eye: ocean storms, cityscapes, a girl running barefoot through a lavender field. And then I saw it. Tucked into the far wall, beneath soft overhead lights, stood a painting. My breath caught in my chest. It was me again, not the version he had painted from memory that first time. This was newer, older. I was sitting at the front desk of the bookstore. A stack of books at my elbow, sleeves rolled up. Chin resting on my hand as sunlight streamed through the glass behind me. But what stopped me wasn't the technique, it was the truth in it. I looked peaceful, resilient, soft, but steady. Someone who had bent but never broken. In the background were faint hints of bookshelves and a chalkboard with event dates. And in the bottom corner of the canvas, so small you had to squint to notice, were the initials RT. He was here. Now. I turned, and there he was, standing by a sculpture across the room, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the crowd without urgency. He hadn't changed much, same posture, same quiet energy, same effortless stillness that made everyone else feel like they were moving too fast. Ryan, he hadn't seen me yet. Or maybe he had, and was waiting. I could have walked up to him. I could have spoken. I could have asked 1,000 questions about the painting, about Sophia, about why he left, why he wrote, why he remembered. But I didn't. Because in that moment, he turned and saw me. He didn't flinch, didn't rush. Just looked at me with the calm of someone who had waited a long time and never doubted the arrival. Our eyes met across the room, and he smiled. Not a regretful smile, not longing, not apology, just simple recognition. Warm, clear, present. I smiled back. No words exchanged. No need. In that moment, I knew everything I needed to know. He remembered. He still saw me. And more than anything, he still chose to. We didn't speak that day in the gallery, not then, not even after the smile. But something opened in the air like dust, shifting in still light. Weeks passed, spring matured into early summer. The bookstore got busier. Deborah came by more often, and we started having small conversations, mostly about books, occasionally about music. Nothing heavy, just enough to feel human. One morning, a letter arrived. This time in handwriting I hadn't seen since the poetry book. John, if you're open to it, I'd like to meet before I leave. Just once. No expectations, no rewrites. Just truth. Ryan, he had left his number. I stared at it for a long while before typing it in. I didn't text back immediately. I waited a day. Then 2. Then I said yes. We met on a Tuesday. Late afternoon. At the small cafe beside the art gallery. The one with the peeling blue chairs and the chalkboard specials. Ryan was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window. A coffee in front of him, sketchpad closed beside his elbow. He stood when he saw me, hands in his pockets, like he always did when unsure what to do with himself. I didn't know if you'd come, he said. I almost didn't. He smiled gently. Fair. We sat. There were no rehearsed lines. No urgent need to justify the past. Just two people holding what little still connected them. I owe you an apology, he said after a long pause. Not for how I felt, but for what I never said, for how it all unfolded. You deserved clarity, not confusion. I wasn't confused, I replied. I just didn't understand. Ryan nodded. I didn't either, not then. He sipped his drink, looked out the window for a moment, then turned back to me. I loved you, he said. Quietly, completely. But I never acted on it. Not once. I know, I said, and I did. She saw it before I did, he continued. Sophia, she saw the way I watched you read, the way I softened around you. I tried to ignore it. I convinced myself it was admiration, curiosity, but she was right. It was deeper. And by the time I understood it, everything was already fractured. Why didn't you say anything before you left? I asked. I was ashamed, he said simply, of how it looked, of what it would do to you, of what it had already done. I nodded, letting his words land. But I had to paint you, he added. I had to give the feelings somewhere to go. I smiled. You painted me more truthfully than anyone ever saw me. That's because I wasn't trying to capture your face, he said. I was capturing the stillness, the resilience, the part of you that survived even when you weren't speaking. There was a long pause after that, a peaceful one. Then he said, I'm not here to ask for anything. I have someone now. Back home. She's kind, gentle. We built something honest. I came here only to close a circle, not to reopen one. It didn't sting, it didn't ache, it felt clean. I'm happy for you, I said, and I meant it. I still think about you, he said. Not as a regret, as a reminder that some connections shape us, even if they don't stay. I let those words linger. Then I asked him something that had been resting on my chest for a long time. Was I unfair? Did I lead you on, just by being kind? He looked surprised. Never. You were kind, because that's who you are. I fell for that not because you gave me anything, but because you never pretended to be anyone else. I exhaled. Something untied inside me. Ryan slid a small envelope across the table. I was going to leave this at the bookstore if you didn't come. I opened it. Inside was a sketch, just pencil. Simple lines. Me again. Reading, but this time, smiling genuinely, softly, without fear. You always looked happiest in your own world, he said. It reminded me how sacred that world can be. I wanted you to have it. I tucked the drawing into my bag and stood. Goodbye, Ryan. He stood too. Goodbye, John. We didn't hug. Didn't promise to stay in touch, but as I walked away, I didn't feel the urge to look back. The ache that had once lived in my bones had softened into memory. No bitterness, just a story that had reached its natural end. When I got home, I found Deborah waiting by the counter. She looked up from her sketchpad and smiled. Busy day, she asked. Closure day, I replied. I poured her tea, sat across from her, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like anything was missing. The silence had done its work. Sophia never apologized, never reached out. She still posted online, tagged foreign cities, and quoted broken poets. She spoke in generalizations, never names, but I didn't need her to name me. I didn't need her forgiveness, because I had already found mine, and that was enough. That photo, the one that started it all, I still keep it. It's framed now, not tucked away in a drawer, not buried behind receipts, or hidden in guilt. It rests beside the cash register at the bookstore, right under the tiny lamp that stays on, even after closing. Sometimes, customers ask about it. I just say, it's a reminder, not of Ryan, not of Sophia, of me, of the moment I realized someone had seen me truly, seen me without me ever performing for it. That photo didn't change my life because of who took it. It changed my life, because it proved I existed. Even when I thought I was invisible. There's something quiet about being observed like that. Not stalked, not possessed. Just noticed, like art. Even now, when the days are slow, and the shelves need dusting, I glance at it. Not out of longing. Not for nostalgia. But to remember that even in silence, something honest can survive. Deborah sometimes brings her own sketches now. One day, she showed me one she'd drawn of me shelving books, back turned, hair tucked behind one ear. "You always look like you're holding a secret," she said. I smiled. Maybe I am. Maybe the secret is this: I didn't have to fight. I didn't have to defend myself. I didn't have to scream the truth from rooftops, because time has a way of surfacing what people bury. Guilt leaks, envy corrodes, and lies collapse under their own weight. Sophia was her own undoing. Every angry post, every whisper at dinner tables, every silent treatment, she crafted her own version of revenge. I just stepped back, watched, let it unfold. It wasn't cowardice. It was choice. Not everything deserves an answer. Not every fire needs more oxygen. And so I let her rage burn out. I kept the photo. I kept the silence. And eventually, I kept the peace. Ryan never returned after that cafe meeting. He emailed once, months later, just to say he hoped I was painting. Again, I didn't reply. Some threads are best left resting. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't heartbroken. I was simply done. And being done, that's a kind of freedom people rarely talk about. It's not loud. It doesn't arrive with fireworks. It slips in quietly, like morning light under a closed door. And suddenly, you realize you're not carrying that weight anymore. Not her jealousy. Not his absence. Not the blame. Not the guilt. Just yourself. Standing in the middle of your own life. That photo, the one that started it all. I still keep it. Not because I long for what never was, but because it reminds me, even when you're unseen, someone might be watching you like your art, and even if they never say a word, the truth always finds its way to the surface. In the end, I didn't need to take revenge. She did it to herself, and I simply moved on.